got somebody joining us a little bit early. I'm going to give it just a minute, see if we can get a couple more people to hop on. This is my first live stream ever. I think I made the mistake of going with the Google Hangouts option. It seemed like an easy setup. I think the quality is not going to be as good as what I'm going to want to do in the future. But if we can get a few people on here watching, I think that'll be a good thing. Like I said, I'll give it a few minutes, but basically what I want to do today is I want to talk about Bright. I would assume anybody joining the live chat watched Bright last night or doesn't care about spoilers, because there will be some spoilers. I'm not going to get real big into the spoilers because the point here isn't necessarily to talk endlessly about this movie. What I really want to do is talk about what it might mean for the future. It's a really big deal that this movie came out, so we're going to talk a little bit about what the implications are, what type of things we might get out of Netflix going forward. I do get questions sometimes about whether or not I'm sponsored by Netflix. I am not in any way, shape, or form sponsored by Netflix. I really like the service, and I do find it's very difficult to get a lot of value out of it. So that's part of why I have this channel, is not just for Netflix, but out of your movie watching experience. And so that's what we're going to do here. And then that's why I give all the recommendations I do on Netflix as well. So basically, my thoughts on, let's see. Yeah, we're right at 12:05. So I'll go ahead and start. Basically, my thoughts on Bright were, it's not bad. I didn't love it, but I also didn't expect to love it. But I had some major issues with it, which I've got some notes here. We'll talk about those first. But it wasn't bad. It wasn't horrible. Will Smith has really been missing the mark for the last several years. And so this is really one of the better showings for him in a while. So I thought that was good. I was a little surprised by that, but I basically, it kind of was exactly what I thought it was going to be, which left me a little disappointed. I was kind of hoping to be surprised by this movie, but I think it's okay. I don't think it has to be this movie that would have made tens of millions of dollars in its opening weekend if it were to have been released in theaters. I don't think that's what it had to be. If it was that type of movie, I think we'd be having a much different conversation. Huge. I think there'd be some major and we'll talk about what those could have been. But as far as what was not good about the movie, my main gripe, because I think a lot of it was fairly creative, but the dialogue I thought was horrible. I really, would put all of that on the writer, which is John Landis' son, and John Landis is famous for An American Werewolf in London, The Blues Brothers. So just really top tier writer director. And this is his son, who's a little bit younger than me. I think he's like just turned 30. He wrote this, and it's because I knew that going into it. But I kept thinking like this, the tough guy dialogue in this movie, which is a lot of it, was just horrible. And I felt like it was written by that's never had crosswords with the legitimate, thuggery of any type. And that's what it felt like watching it, and that's exactly what it is. So that easily could have been fixed. They could have got somebody to come in and help write this thing, or at least polish up some of the dialogue. It could have stayed the exact same with the story, because I thought the story was okay. But it was basically like David Ayer's best movie, End of Watch, with orcs and mythical creatures. So it's a cool idea, but story-wise, it didn't blow me away. It was good enough that I don't have any complaints. I mean, there was just some stuff where it's like, nobody talks like that. And there was even like I also had something else in the back of my mind the whole time, reference to Shrek and a couple of other things, which is just a dumb way to like try to talk tough to somebody. And it wasn't funny. But if this was really like the reality that people lived in, not only would the world be like a completely different looking place, but like exist. If there was really mythical creatures, like that movie would have never been made. We would have had a completely different reality. So it's odd that like the movie Shrek and actual orcs, even though he was an ogre, live in the same universe. That was a weird decision for me. But I've got complaints with that. But on the positive side, I thought the makeup was fantastic. And beyond the makeup, and who played Jacoby, I thought he did a really fantastic job acting through that makeup. He did a really good job with his eyes. I mean, he had contacts, the full brow, nose. I thought he did a fantastic job. I think he's probably the standout from this movie. He was probably the best thing about this movie. I'm a big fan of his to begin with, but he did a great job. Noomi Rapace, I thought she did a good job as the villain. I thought the elves being the villains was a cool idea. And just the look of the movie, it was really badass, just the way it looked. So there was a lot of positive things about it. But, you know, I was really hoping for it to just be a little bit more of a mind blow. So that people were like, oh my God, I can't believe Netflix put this out. You know, that's really what I was hoping for. And that's not what we got, but that's also not what I expected. So, you know, one thing to keep in mind with this as to whether or not these Netflix originals are successful is you can't look at them the same way you would a major release, a major theatrical release. Because in a major theatrical release, a lot hinges on the opening, not just the opening weekend, but the opening couple of weeks. Like that's where they make at least half of their money is like the first 2 or 3 weeks. With Netflix, they're not actually making money directly. And the trick here, I believe, is the long game. So Netflix wants to have a library of exclusive content that people like and can only consume it by being Netflix subscribers. So their game is to earn and retain subscribers with the series and the original movies that they put out. So it's not necessary that a lot of people watch it up front. I think it was a little more necessary for this one because the budget for this movie was $90 million, which is fairly on par with a lot of big budget summer and holiday movies. It's a little bit on the low side, you know, action movies that, you know, have really big budgets, they creep up more to like 200 million. But 90 million is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot. And basically, if you watched it, if you're a Netflix subscriber, you help pay for it. You help fund that movie. So that's a cool thing. I like that aspect of it. So that's why I made the point to watch it right away. Honestly, this is one I probably could have waited on, but I did want to go ahead and knock it out, how good it was. And I got to say it's good enough. I think, though, we're going to really be looking for Netflix to create better content. And right now, I think Amazon's giving them a run for their money in terms of quality. Amazon is a little more under the radar. Amazon Studios is actually putting out some award-winning, Academy Award-winning movies, like Manchester by the Sea. That was an Amazon Studios picture last year, won a couple of Academy Awards, but they're not releasing their content directly on the platform. They're going through theaters. They're going through the traditional channels and then putting them on Amazon Prime months after, you know, they get some DVD sales out of it. So they're going very traditional with it, and they're being rewarded for it. You know, Hollywood is awarding them literally, whereas Netflix is essentially being shunned by the establishment. They're actually not, you know, being allowed to show their movies in major theaters. They're shutting them down when that was really part of their plan to kind of make some of their money back. So that's not really panned out. Ahead, they're continuing to make some really good movies. So it happens, but I don't think Bright is good enough to get a big enough audience and to spike their sponsorship, to spike their subscribers enough to really make it change the way Netflix works in the future. So, you know, that said, I think they're going to have to just keep plugging away. They're still working on these like small movies The Polka King is a Jack Black movie that looks kind of cool. It looks really similar to Bernie that he did a couple of years ago, which is a great movie if you didn't see that one. It's not as grim looking as that one, but it's a cool looking little indie movie that easily could have come out in theaters. It's going to be on Netflix in like 2 weeks. It's not going to get the heavy promotions that Bright got, but I think we're going to see more of that out of Netflix, and then maybe one, maybe two big blockbuster movies annually, until they really start to, until they have maybe even just one movie that everybody talks about. Like, oh my God, this is on Netflix. I can't believe, you haven't seen it. That's the type of thing Netflix is going to need in order to really make this work in the future. So, sorry a little bit about this live chat. I know I'm not able to have the chat up. Oh, there we go. There's a couple. Yeah. But we're going to work on this in the future and see, if we can make it work a little bit better. One thing I will say about this movie is, as far as a David Ayers movie with Will Smith in it, it was better than Suicide Squad. And I think a big reason for that is because Netflix is essentially staying out of the way. And I think that's also why this movie had some flaws in it. I think it could have benefited from somebody stepping in and saying, whoa, like this kid does not know how to write dialogue for these characters, these street hardened characters. This kid is not good at that. We need somebody to come in and polish this up. A kind of a heavy-handed producer could have done that, but Netflix isn't really doing that. They're really letting the creators create. So I think that was the flaw here, but I think it's also a reason this movie was better than Suicide Squad. And the reason I compare it to Suicide Squad is you had a lot of the same people working on it, not just the same director, but a lot of the same production crew. It had a similar look. It had a similar quality, similar budget, similar expectations. It had a lot in common with Suicide Squad, and it was way better because it did a good job of telling the story. I think the major issues with Suicide Squad was the story was like convoluted. Like there were things that just didn't make sense. And when you go back and watch it, you can kind of tell it was like a heavy-handed. It had to be a heavy-handed production. So I'm glad that I didn't see that here, and I really haven't seen that on any of the Netflix originals so far. So I think that's fantastic. I'm excited to see what Netflix is able to do in the future. I think that's going to be really cool to see what type of movies they put out. But this one. I don't really like to do reviews, which is part of the reason I'm doing this live chat. I don't really want to review this movie as much as just talk about, like, is it good enough to change the future of movies? And I would say, no, it's not. This movie alone is not. But just the fact that it exists, the fact that it was produced and it was released the way it was released, I think that is going to change things. Had it been a massive failure, in terms of just like a movie, in terms of just being a shitty movie, I think we probably have a problem going forward. I don't know how Netflix would justify a $90 million budget if the movie was just total garbage. As far as garbage goes, it is getting ripped apart by the critics. The critics are just tearing it a new one. I think they're being a little bit disingenuous with it. They could be critical of it. There's a lot to be critical of. But there's also some positive things, and I'm not really seeing that in any of the reviews that I've read. Fans seem to be liking it, so it's not a total misfire. So I think that's a good thing. So I'm excited to see what happens. But, basically, if you watched anything from our Netflix week videos, Netflix is not, they are not looking for just high view count. They're not just basing things on the view count. The way their algorithm works is they really put a lot more value on viewers, on viewers that don't watch much on Netflix, because if they watch Bright and then maybe they only watch a couple other hours that month of Netflix, but they did take the time to watch Bright, essentially is able to show like Bright did a good job of adding value to customers that might not otherwise keep Netflix. If you're like me and you watch maybe 30 to 40 hours of Netflix a month, the fact that you watch Bright is of lesser value to them. Obviously, they care that you watched it, but as far as their algorithm goes, the algorithm does not indicate that Bright makes me retain my subscription with Netflix. So, I think they need to while to see if that happens. It's also going to take a while to see if this movie gets any legs, meaning maybe it becomes a little bit of a cult. It gets a little bit of a cult following where people talk about it, and it gets a little bit of fandom built behind it. I do think they set it up to have multiple movies, and I'll say this as far as a review goes. If they put out a sequel in a year or two, I would watch it. I would watch it fairly soon. I didn't love it, but I was engaged with it for the entirety of the movie. It didn't ever really bore me or put me to sleep at any point. So I would watch a sequel. I think they set up for a sequel, but the movie does stand on its own. I don't know if anyone watching saw The Dragon. There was a dragon flying across the moon, way in the background of the LA skyline at one point. I do find it odd that we're in this universe with orcs and fairies and elves and dragons, I guess. This was the best story we could tell, which was basically just a rehash of David Ayer's End of Watch, which I'm disappointed by that. It was basically the same setup. Two buddy cops come across something that they should not have, that they need to hold on to. It was basically the same thing. Did not like that aspect. I've already seen that movie. And End of Watch, point being, End of Watch is a way better movie. That would be a good one to watch if you like this movie. Just go watch End of Watch and just forget about the fact that there's not going to be anything mythical in it. But basically, that's about it. I'm a little disappointed in the fact that I don't think it's really going to change anything. That's a big point of even having this live stream, is we were going to talk about whether it changes everything or anything. And I think it basically doesn't change anything except for the fact that it exists. I do think we'll see more big movies coming directly to your home. I think that is going to happen, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen really fast. And I think that's okay. I think there's still a lot of value in seeing something in the theater. But I don't know if you can see back here. I've got a 100-inch projection screen, so this movie was great to watch at home, and I didn't have to, people just constantly talking behind me. That's just gotten that way 10 years ago. I don't remember going to the movie theater and constantly having people talk behind me. But for the last several years, I can't go to the movies without having somebody talk behind me. So that's a big reason I just like to watch stuff at home. So that's a positive thing. But as another part of the Netflix week that I just put out, I did talk about how Quentin Tarantino doesn't like Netflix, and he makes some good points. He thinks that when you used to go to the video store, you picked something out and you had more of a commitment to it. I don't disagree with that, but I think he's missing the fact that content is being created that otherwise would not be created. So we just got a comment from somebody who's watching it. Yeah, I agree. Julian, yeah, it is End of Watch, just in a different skin. Again, I think it's cool that Netflix created it. It's really got a lot of redeeming qualities. It's not, man, it's just not what I was hoping for, but still a cool flick. I mean, if you didn't know too much about it and you just stumbled across it, you'd be like, oh my God, this is awesome. And also, if you just consider it to be like a made-for-TV movie, which is basically what it is, it's an equivalent to that. It's like one of the best, or at least coolest TV movies ever made. Now, there were some others, excuse me, it's one of the drawbacks of doing a live stream. But I'm excited about, what might happen in the future. I think Don't get David Ayer to do it again. I think he's kind of lost his way. Into Watch was great. Fury was pretty good. Suicide Squad sucked. And then this is maybe an uptick for him by a little bit, but not a fantastic director. Speaking of things that are on the horizon, Netflix has announced a Martin Scorsese movie. I'm questioning whether or not that's going to get done. Not because I don't think Scorsese would do one. He obviously would because he's in talks to do it, and I think Netflix could entice him, especially because they're not going to overproduce it, and you can't do that with Martin Scorsese. Oh, hang on. You can't do that with Martin Scorsese. He won't put up for that. So I don't think there's any reasons that it won't get done other than the fact that Scorsese is infamous for kind of rolling with projects and then not into production, moving on to something else. And plus, he hasn't worked with De Niro in almost 2 decades. So I almost don't see that movie getting made. If that gets made, that would be huge. That would be huge for Netflix. So I'm excited to see what happens there. I'm going to be following that story. If you haven't heard about it, it's called The Irishman. And it's not even in pre-production. It's just been announced. There's talks. But De Niro, both interested, and Al Pacino, they're all interested in it. So it's one of those things that sounds like a internet rumor. And apparently it's not. Apparently it's a real thing that may or may not happen. But I would imagine in another 6 months, under production. But even though that would be really cool for Netflix, I really wanted to see Scorsese's movie he was going to do with DiCaprio, The Devil in the White City, where he plays H.H. Holmes, one of the most famous serial killers in American history. That would have been a way cooler movie, and that would not come to Netflix. That would be a theatrical release. I'd rather go see that in the theater than see this kind of rehash De Niro project on Netflix, even though that would probably be the best thing Netflix ever has put out. So that's cool. Netflix is doing a great job with their series. It took them a little while to get there. They were putting some stuff out that was so-so, and then they got better and better. And then now, they've got just some of the best series available. So I'm hoping that happens with movies. Part of the problem is there's so much content on Netflix, I never know what to watch. So that's why I like to give recommendations every week. So if you're watching and you're not a subscriber, definitely subscribe. I give a list of recommendations for Netflix and sometimes Amazon Prime every single week. But they don't do a good job of promoting stuff. They did a great job with this, but they kind of had to because of the budget on it. I'd love to see Netflix do a better job promoting the content that they're putting out. Making it easier for me to determine what I should and shouldn't watch, because there's way too much content to watch everything. Like, apparently the show Glow is good. I'm gonna watch Glow. I'm not gonna watch it. It doesn't even seem like it's really for me. But just because some Netflix puts out something that's good doesn't mean you have to watch it. But if they put something out that sort of looks like it might be good for you, and even if it's not great, I think you still should support it, watch it, give it the time, because we're really on the cusp of, a big change, a big swing in the way we consume content. So that's exciting. That's why I was really excited for Bright. If you follow me on Instagram, I did several posts. I was a little disappointed in the low engagement on those posts, but I get it. If this movie was coming out in theaters, it's not something I would have really been paying attention to. It's certainly not something I would have been posting about on my Instagram account. My excitement was really just relegated to the fact that it was being released the way it was. And I was disappointed in how few people seemed to be interested in that. But, the movie needs to stand on its own for its own merits. So on that note, it's kind of like I said, I give it a C. It doesn't change anything. I don't think it sets Netflix back in terms of their direction in releasing movies on a home scale. I think it's just kind of a wash, which is disappointing, but it's not a bad thing. It's a cool movie. Some people will love it. Teenage boys are going to love this movie. It is a cool movie if you're a teenage boy. If you're a 33-year-old man, it's kind of weak. I'd rather just go back and rewatch Training Day and then go watch like a fantasy movie separate, and just keep those two things separate, even though I really loved the idea when I first heard it. But that's basically all my thoughts for this movie. Thanks. I've just got a couple of you watching now. Thanks for watching. If you like this type of stuff I'm putting on this channel, please subscribe. I'm putting out 2 to 3 videos a week now. I'm trying to stick with 3. At a minimum, I'm doing 2 every single week. And one of those is always a list of at least 10 movies you can watch on streaming. Good movies that I recommend that you watch, because again, they're really hard to find, but probably won't be making it on any of my top 10 lists. But on that note, if you did like this movie and you want to get one movie recommendation, I'll give you one for this live stream. Spectral is a Netflix original that came out 6-8 months ago. It's better than smaller budget. It was probably closer to a $30 million budget, but budget doesn't matter. It was a cooler movie in terms of like a supernatural action movie. It's just much more interesting, and it was created. The story made more sense. It didn't really have as many flaws. So go watch that one. If you like Bright, you'll probably like Spectral better. But I'm gonna go ahead and sign off, and thanks for watching.